see the transition, but I do feel like it might be like the Diablo Canyon at some point where you say, hey, maybe we do need nuclear power. And so then it gets extended a while because you realize that is cheap, it's safe, it's clean, really clean. 9% of the state's power grid comes from that nuclear power plant, but 28% of all clean energy comes from that nuclear power plant. And we were about to let it go. And it just boggles my mind that this is the stuff that we're doing. And I think we could get to that point with gasoline too.
Hello and welcome again to another episode of Sacktown Talks. Today we're glad to be joined by Assemblyman Joe Patterson. Been waiting a long time to say that. Joe, how's it going? Welcome to the program.
Hey, thanks for having me again.
I know, this is amazing. Like, you started as a staffer, as a fellow, right? In the building?
Even before that, an intern.
A fellow, a staffer, worked as a lobbyist, city councilman, and now here you are, assembly member. How's it feel to have that button on and have your own office over there?
It's different. I mean, I'm not used. I'll give you an example. The other day I was calling down, I was looking for the phone number to call the basement to say, hey, I'm going to come down and grab my car now. Right. And I didn't know what the number was. I'm trying to track it down. And then my scheduler walks in and kind of gives me a bad look, thinking, hey, just ask me. I'll call for the car, but it's awkward to ask people to do stuff like that for you. Right. But I mean, that's what they're there for. And, I'm lucky we have a really good team, but just the adjustments from a staff person to a member, I mean, I'm 1 week in, so I don't know. I'll let you know more later.
Yeah. So like swearing in day, like being on the green carpet, having your own desk, like what was that like? What's that like being on that floor?
Well, I've been on it so many times, right? So I don't know if just being there itself was such a big deal, but I think really pressing the the green and red buttons was different.
Where are you sitting and who's your seatmate?
I sit probably, if you're walking in the back of the chambers all the way on the left-hand side, probably about 3 or 4 rows back.
Back row, good place to
be. Wherever they put all the Republicans. Sitting next to Megan Daly.
Nice.
Yeah. So I'd have to ask her, what do I do? What do I do here, so.
Now, did you get to pick your seatmate or like who decides where you sit and who do you sit next to?
I don't know.
The
powers above decide. But I think it's something between, the caucus and then the speaker ultimately decides, obviously, right? And I'm sure there's some history stuff in there and whose seats are gone, right? All that stuff that go into it.
So like this is a unique thing, and this is something I think Alex Vassar touched on, is there's 2 Jay Pattersons. We got Joe Patterson, we got Jim Patterson. So like when it's coming to the vote, what do they call you?
Joe Patterson.
They do.
Yeah, and they have same on the board, so it'll say Joe Patterson and Jim Patterson.
So you guys don't get confused.
So we don't get confused, yeah. So.
But there was no thought of sitting you guys next to each other.
No, that would have been pretty funny.
Caucus.
We should just do it one day, So, and then also, as the chairwoman of the California Republican Party is Jessica Patterson.
Right, okay.
And she actually has my same email address when I used to work for the California Republican Party a long time ago. So
that's funny.
It's kind of funny.
That's
so
wild.
We are the Patterson caucus for sure. So.
And so like, you have 4 children, you kind of tweeted about, how they're going to handle the swearing in. Mm-hmm. So how did they handle it?
Oh, exactly how I predicted.
Yeah.
So they were pretty good, Dad, when's this over? But the
do we have to dress up?
Yeah, exactly. But probably about halfway into the speaker's speech, my daughter, my 1.5-year-old, goes underneath the desk, and my wife's like, "Oh, be careful, you're gonna bonk your head." Sure enough, she stands up underneath the desk, hits her head, starts wailing in the middle of the speaker's speech, So my wife had to grab her, and she went out the back, So it went exactly how I thought it was going to go. And then the kids, the rest of the time, when is this over? It's like, can you guys just relax?
Like,
can you just relax?
I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm just here, So
we all want it to be over.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of ceremonial things that go on. I mean, that are great for us, I think. But, kids, they really didn't care at all.
Yeah.
They loved being there. But, once you get the speeches and all those things, they were just, hey, can we just get out of here now?
Yeah.
So my wife probably could have taken all of them, but they just hung out with me, and Megan entertained him a little bit, and so.
That's nice. Well, I think Gallagher has about 5 or 6 of himself. So
yeah, he's got 5 kids, and I think
experience.
they were all there too, but they're a little older.
Right.
A little older. I think he's got 1 or 2. The twins are like 4 and 5 or something like that, and I have a 4-year-old also, and he was probably the roughest in terms of like, Dad, when are we done?
Yeah.
When are we done? It's like, man, just hold on. He takes some more Skittles. I had Skittles. Vince Vaughn gave me some Skittles from his desk, so I was just entertaining the kids with Skittles the whole time.
So like they're like actual desks. You can like store stuff in them. And
yeah, you can
snacks.
store stuff
and
snacks, and I don't know. I might need a coffee maker in there for when session starts.
Deck it out.
So
a little espresso machine.
Yeah, exactly.
That'd be nice.
Yeah.
So new office in the swing space. Kind of where are you at? How's your office?
Well, as a staffer, I don't know. It's interesting when people complain about the swing space because to me, the swing space, well, from a Republican, when I was in the doghouse with a former boss of mine, but just any Republican office, so small in the swing space in the Capitol, but in the swing space, there's more equity. Although don't get me wrong, there are definitely, the Republican floor is sort of like the 4th floor, and then the offices get a little larger as you go up the building. But my office is great. I mean, we have, my office, my chief of staff's office, and then I think 3 or 4 cubicles, and then a reception area also. So I don't know, it works well for us.
Yeah. And did you get like furniture included? Did you have to move anything in there? Or?
Yeah, I mean, I got, all our furniture, everything was set up. We just had to order a new computer for one of the staff members, but I don't know if it's going to be my permanent office. We won't know that. Yeah. So I could be moving at any time.
Yeah.
So,
and what about like art? Can't you get like art from like the archives or something like that? Can't you have like order art from like the basement that was like,
hey, you tell me.
Ago?
I don't know.
Ask about
that. Okay.
Because I know that's something you can do is you can have like some of the old art installed in the office.
Well, I do have a giant, there's these huge beams. I mean, I don't even know how they're like 5 feet, just circles, that structural beams in the middle of people's offices. Well, mine is right in the member's office, right behind my chair. And it takes up a lot of room, So if you back up the chair, you're going to hit it. And so it's just interesting because other members are like, oh, yeah, you got to see if you can switch office to a place without a beam. It's like, I'll survive.
So, you kind of tweeted out about little technical difficulties you had in setup, kind of having to learn how to use a PC. I know your wife works for Apple. How is it adjusting to the other side?
I don't know. I'm just going to keep using my Mac, but so when I worked in the building, we still had a fax machine, right? Well, apparently we can receive faxes. I don't know who sends faxes, but I'll find out. But it
might be the better way to send stuff to members now, actually.
I don't know.
Now that we know this, right?
Well, it goes to the public email box, apparently. So somebody's still got to check in, do whatever. So yeah, I've learned that if I do a tweet just joking about something dysfunctional in the building, I will definitely get calls on it. I mean, when I was joking about the heater that my staff was trying to freeze me out, I probably received several people came over like, oh, can we help you turn on the heater? It's like, no, I'm just joking, The fax machine.
I'm hungry. I could use the same.
Yeah, exactly. Well, not from a lobbyist, though.
Well, unless it's under $10.
And a $10 sandwich, but you can't buy anything for under $10.
No, that was interesting. No. You got the new limits, right? And all the limits went up except the lobbyist expenditure is still $10.
It's crazy to think, which is fine. I mean, you go out to lunch with the lobbyist or whatever, but there is no exception with the lobbying. If you've known the person, like I've known you for a while, right? I mean, it doesn't matter, I mean, you can buy me a latte once a month or something like that. So, which I'll take,
monthly? Yeah.
If you want to buy me one.
Price of lattes. Yeah. Kind of bringing that up, kind of California, quality of life, rising costs, inflation, price of lattes at Starbucks. Kind of that's a big issue here in California. Kind of what do you think? What's some of the things we can do and kind of, make this place a little more affordable and livable for your average blue collar person?
I think everything we do in this state, it's just costs so much money added on to bills. I mean, you look at your utility bills. I mean, everybody gets mad at utility bills, right? I mean, gas and electric and stuff like that. I mean, the cost of those two, of gas and electric, is driven by what happens in the Capitol, you know, and, you know, to the extent we don't use hydropower or don't calculate a certain amount of it, you know, obviously gas prices, I mean, the taxes are way higher here. We're about to enter that special session talking about, why are gas prices so much in California? You know, well, we have the highest gas prices, right? So these are decisions made in Sacramento by, you know, the majority party. And, you know, we gotta start not doing that anymore.
Right.
Every year there are new bills add on, a little fee on your phone bill. A little, you know, another fee onto your utility bill. Or sometimes you don't even see it as a fee. It just gets incorporated into the rates, right? So, you know, we just have to stop doing those things.
It was interesting, you know, talking to different lobbyists, and some lobbyists legislate in other states, right? And a lot of these legislatures are part-time. And they talk about, wow, how refreshing it is talking to these members from other states, because, you know, it's their part-time job, right? They have like full-time businesses or jobs. And, you know, everyone says, they seem to get it. You know, as here, you know, a lot of our members are lifetime politicians, right? Maybe they don't get into the weeds as much. Kind of, you know, how does that help you? Kind of, you know, you've been out of politics for a while. You've been on your own. You've been a city council member. You know, you've heard from people kind of looking into the finer details kind of in these bills, and how, you know, it's really going to affect people kind of this bottom line when it gets implemented.
I think working with, being on a city council is actually very helpful when I was on that, because people will, for example, we would, the cost of garbage would come through city councils all the time. And so the rate increases would come to us, and then we would have to see those studies from, you know, the or the garbage provider. And so I think that was really helpful. But obviously, working with businesses for the last several years is going to be helpful, because I see those. You know, my mom's still a waitress to this day, right? And so you look at things like minimum wage going up, and then I see what happens to the restaurant being able to actually pay that minimum wage, and then what happens to the prices on breakfast. And it's good to discuss minimum wage and things like that. That's a fair policy debate, but it does actually have an impact on the business actually being able to operate. So if people like, $6 lattes, then they're willing to pay that for. That's another thing too, is what is the cost threshold for the public to pay for these services? And are we pressing those boundaries a little bit? I think people are only going to pay so much more for, especially things they don't really need, like a latte or whatever. So at some point, people are going to say, hey, I don't need those anymore. It'll be really interesting to see what happens during Christmas shopping. You might see revenue go up because we have such high inflation right now. But how much as a percentage of disposable income were people spending on Christmas gifts? That's what'll be really interesting as sort of that number starts to come out. So.
You know, I guess you have an interesting background, right? You didn't grow up with this privileged life, right? You're out of Napa. Your mom was a waitress, and you kind of made your way here. Kind of tell the listeners who don't know your background, kind of a little bit about you and yourself, and how you found your way to Sacramento.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Napa, California, and it's a pretty, people don't think so, but especially when I grew up, it was a pretty blue-collared community. I mean, the city of Napa itself. And my mom growing up, she still is a waitress. And
Where is she a waitress
at this place called Buttercream Bakery in Napa. It's kind of like the diner in Napa.
Buttercream Bakery.
And they make donuts and all those kinds of things. So I ate a lot of donuts growing up, I'll tell you that. But but I remember it's sometimes you don't really remember these things growing up, but I shared a bed with my brother when I was little. We lived in a 1-bedroom apartment. I shared a bed with my brother. We didn't have a car. So that was interesting. And then my mom married my stepdad, and so it was a 2-income family. And I think we had a little bit more expensive. We got a car, for example, so people get to work and school and stuff. But what brought me to Sacramento was the affordability of Sac State. And then I also had my mom and dad were divorced. So my dad's family, my grandma and grandpa were in Sacramento. So if I really needed a place to stay or something like that, they would help me. And so I went to Sac State, and that's kind of where I fell in love with politics, I guess you could say. So
yeah, that's interesting. You know, you're kind of talking about how you grew up, how you shared a bed with your brother, kind of similar to a lot of assembly members. You know, you kind of hear about, you know, not that different than Robert Rivas when he came on and kind of told his story. But you know, everyone has different politics. What kind of drew you to being a Republican coming from your background?
Well, in college, I had mentors. Now, you know, a couple of years older than me, I guess you could say, and this was during the Gore and Bush stuff, right? So kind of, that was very loud, right? That was the first time that I remember really such conflict in a presidential election. And then I took a couple government classes, really, that's it. In terms of being Republican, I just always, it's interesting based on my experience. And growing up, you might think that maybe I have a different political perspective, but we always believed that the entitlements and things like that, it's a nice safety net. If you're unemployed, you can use unemployment to help sustain you until you find something else, right? And then at a certain point it runs out, but it wasn't this ongoing forever, oh, we need to get unemployment. And not that unemployment does that in California anyways, but just that sense of if you work hard, you can make things work here. And so my mom's a Democrat, but she's also, but if you talk to her, I think she's kind of, if you did a poll,
right,
you know, she might be one of those people. She voted for Republican in the recall. And if you were to ask her what she thinks, I mean, she doesn't like Trump and she doesn't like Gavin Newsom,
right,
you know, and that's just where she's at. I think that's kind of a typical voter in a lot of ways, right? Not necessarily those views, but not necessarily, I'm going to be a Democrat, I'm going to be a Republican.
Right.
So, but it's interesting.
Yeah. You know, you're kind of sharing a story earlier off camera, kind of about how Bill Dodd sponsored your Little League team back when you were playing in Napa. Can you kind of share that story with the listeners?
Yeah, you're gonna be. He's gonna be mad at this for sure. But we'll do a clip and send it to him. Yeah. But when I was playing Little League baseball, we didn't have a sponsor at first, and then so we started playing unsponsored. Every team needed a sponsor to sort of cover the costs. And somehow, a couple weeks into the season, they said, "Oh, you now have a sponsor." And I think it was Diversified Water Systems or whatever, and eventually became Culligan.
Right.
And so I saw him in the elevator the other day, and I mentioned, "Oh, you actually sponsored my Little League team, you know? Oh, don't age me like that." But it was really great that he did that. His family's been involved in the community forever in Napa, right? Yeah. So, and that helped me be able to play baseball. We were actually worried about not having a sponsor, not being able to do the season. Wow. So he kind of came through and we had a season, and that was my only year. So, you know.
That was your only year a Little League.
Yeah, I was not a baseball player. So
quickly figured that out.
Yeah, exactly.
That's funny. So you know, you got your office, you know, you're staffed up. Kind of, how was it kind of hiring your staff? Did you have an idea of who you were going to hire beforehand? You know, obviously being a Republican, kind of with redistricting stuff, you know, Republicans have kind of this advantage of there's a lot more staff than jobs. So kind of how was it picking your staff and kind of, you know, choosing who you're going to hire?
Well, my chief of staff, who's Tiffany Sadoff, is a local school board member in Rockland, and she went to high school with my wife, actually, and so that kind of happened.
Is your wife from Rockland?
No, Tiffany went to high school, even though she grew up in Rockland. She went to high school at this little school called East Nicholas, which is also where James Gallagher went.
Right.
And so I always give James and my wife and everybody, you know, bad time about this small school. But they had a congressman come out of that school, and I can't remember the guy's name, and then obviously James, and then my wife and Tiffany. But I just had a meeting with Tiffany one day, and I went back to my wife and I said, "What do you think about this?" And she's like, "Absolutely. That's a great." So she can learn all the capital, how that works. She's very sharp. So once we had her on board, I wanted to empower her to really have the final decision in staffing, because if the member hires everybody, then they might feel overly empowered, not respect enough for the chief, right? And I've seen some of that. And not to say anybody on my team would feel that way, but I really want to empower Tiffany. So we ended up hiring Frank Bigelow's legislative director, Chloe Bowman, and she's great. She has an amazing reputation. And our scheduler used to work for Suzette, Christina. And Harrison is going to work in our district office. He worked with me over the last year, and then got a fellow who's watching this right now, which I'm very excited about. I was a fellow. And I believe I'm the only new member out of all the mentors for fellows to get a fellow. I mean, Enrique could correct me on that, but that's really cool.
So how does that process work? Do the new members just not know to ask for fellows, or is it just kind of like the fellows office decides, everyone puts in a request and
that you interview them, you interview the fellows, then everybody knew that you could interview a fellow. And so I think, for example, the Republican fellows had 15 or 16 interviews with offices, right? So, I mean, most people interviewed them, even incoming people. But you set up interviews and then you rank each other. You rank your top 5 or whatever people, and then they rank their top 5, and then the fellowship office sort of makes the matches and whatever calculus they use.
Kind of like a fraternity bid system.
Yeah, exactly. So it was great to be able to get one. It's basically, quote unquote, free work from my office budget of a very person who's already was vetted, very competent and going to do a great job.
So, you represent what? Roseville, Rockland, Loomis, Placerville, outskirts of Sacramento, kind of suburbs, different areas than here in the heart of the city. During your campaign and election process, what were you hearing from your constituents of, Joe, this is what we're worried about. This is what you want. This is what we want you to work on.
It's definitely different between, by the way, El Dorado County and Placer County.
Right.
El Dorado County is very concerned about fires for good reason. The Caldor fire started in El Dorado County, went all the way, obviously, to Tahoe. So they're very concerned about it, and just the effects that had on the county. Obviously, water, their availability of having water is a lot different than Placer County, which pretty much has a secure source because it secured it decades ago. So those are really things that they're concerned about. But everybody, the whole what's your top issue thing, because we did polling, obviously.
Right.
I mean, inflation was by far and away the number one issue in the cost of living. And it wasn't even close. I would say if you asked Republicans and independents, 60% of people of both Republicans and independents said inflation was their number one issue.
And that's crazy. Like, I remember, you came on, a year and a half ago, we talked about housing.
Yeah.
Kind of like, what was a price of a house in Rockland when you moved there?
Well, I got my house for $495.
And what year was that?
2013.
So
9
years ago.
Yeah.
And what is that same home selling for today?
Well, it kind of peaked at about $1 million for a while, which was crazy. But I mean, you could probably get it for $850 or $9 or something like that, which is
7%
still crazy.
Interest.
That's 7% interest. So I don't know. What's interesting is a lot of people, this is sort of a political nerd thing, but a lot of people say, oh, the demographics in your district are changing. You have a lot of people moving from the Bay Area to, Roseville or whatever. And so you got to be careful. And I agree, you got to always pay attention to what's going on and be responsive to your constituents. But I think what's going to be interesting, if there really is a recession or housing interest rates stay really high, I don't really think a bunch of people are going to be paying, 7% interest on new builds. So,
well, that's crazy. So to think that okay, so you bought your home at 400,000, 4% interest, right?
Well, I mean, my interest rate now, because I refinance, is less than 3%.
Yeah. So your payment's
nothing.
Yeah. Under $2,000 probably. Where if you try to buy that same home today at $1 million at 7%, that's got to be
I don't even want to know.
$6,000 or $7,000, especially up there when you add all the mellow roofs and all that stuff.
It's got to be crazy.
These people are maybe paying close to $10,000 a month to live up there.
It's insane. Yeah. I mean, it's a problem in this state. has done nothing to help with affordability. And
Right.
I know that it's sort of a give and take in terms of, look, I don't want the equity in my house to necessarily drop, right? I mean, you want to keep that sort of nest egg if you can. I mean, you got to be prepared for it to drop, obviously, but at the same time, you want people to be able to afford to live, and there's so many factors that go into that, and as you know, we talked about that last podcast,
Right.
but I could go on about housing forever. There's so many issues.
You
So
know what
many
I love
issues.
about last podcast is that people are still finding it and commenting on it in Twitter. It's like ever since Elon took over Twitter, it's like a whole new algorithms out there. So, we're getting tons of more charming comments out there
Yeah.
from some of your fans, Joe. So,
No, great. Yeah. Well, the housing advocates are very active.
Right.
People, YIMBYs, they're very active in these discussions. And they showed up recently at a Rockland City Council meeting, very controversial. They showed up to advocate for this housing project. And so I think that's part of the reason is people are very interested in housing. And I mean, if you're just getting if we went back to when we graduated college and we were trying to buy a house or even rent an apartment. I mean, when I used to live downtown Sacramento, across from the Capitol, I was paying like $875 a month for a 1-bedroom apartment, and I was sharing it with somebody. So, so now that's probably a $2,500 deal, $2,200 or something. I just don't know how. And then when you look at the truly the salaries of state workers or legislative staffers, I don't know how people can afford that.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's kind of like, we've been talking about housing. You talked about the special session on gas tax. You brought that up briefly. It's kind of a similar thing, right? Where we have all these kind of regulations and taxes, and they just kind of add up on each other. And then we have this end result, which is a really expensive gallon of gas or a really expensive house. Kind of focusing on this special session on gas taxes. Kind of what are you hearing? What have you seen so far? And kind of what are some of your thoughts on this?
Well, I haven't seen a whole lot. I think Republicans have in print right now, unsurprisingly, measures that would waive or at least suspend the increase in the annual gas tax, right? Because in California, it goes up every single year in July. And so there's a proposal to do that. We also have a proposal to, just suspend the gas tax. Obviously, I think both of those have some pretty tough fights ahead. But on the suspension, by the way, it is backfilled by general funds. So the projects would continue to be funded. And I think that's a really important point because we don't want to lose, because we believe that transportation projects and infrastructure projects are one of the primary purposes of government, right? So, hey, continue to fund them, right? So I don't know a lot about what'll end up coming from the governor's office and what'll end up being debated and things like that. But I just don't know how anybody thinks an added tax or penalty is going to do anything to reduce the price of oil.
Right.
So,
well, it's kind of funny. Like you have these different objectives, right? Like it's not a secret, right? They don't want us buying gas, right? They want to eliminate gas cars, right? That's been open. In 12 years, they don't want to sell any more gas cars in California. So there's a transition, right? We know they don't want us buying gas. They give us thousands of dollars to buy electric vehicles, and they're trying to transition us to electric. But here we are actually worried about the price of gas today. Can you kind of talk about that? Like we have policies that, disfavor gas, yet here we are, and therefore we make gas very expensive, but now we're kind of worried about the profits of oil companies on the other side.
Yeah, exactly. And by the way, oil companies I'm not an expert in how the profit margins work or anything like that, but also I do know that those are global companies, right? So what seems like a lot of money, look, it is a lot of money, but it's also a global company. So it's hard to say, well, how much in California, are they going to tax, right? So it is interesting, but also in this current budget year, there's $200 million dedicated to capping oil wells. Some of them are unused, some of them are abandoned, but maybe they're still usable. But at the end of the day, we're capping wells out there. LA City, I think, said recently, no more, even existing permits gone. So I see the transition, but I do feel like it might be like the Diablo Canyon at some point where you say, hey, maybe we do need nuclear power, right? And so then it gets extended a while because you realize that is cheap, it's safe, it's
clean.
It's clean, really clean. 9% of the state's power grid comes from that nuclear power plant, but 28% of our clean energy comes from that nuclear power plant. And we were about to let it go. And it just boggles my mind that this is the stuff that we're doing. And I think we could get to that point with gasoline too. 12 years is
not that
blink
far.
in the eye. Yeah, right. So I would love to
the
buy.
End of your term, huh?
Yeah. So when I term out, I will not be able to purchase a gas vehicle, allegedly. So, and then what happens? Can you buy a gas car in Nevada and bring it back, and still pay your
those are the details.
Whatever. I don't. I don't know what's going to happen.
Right.
So, because I do see Nevada might be very happy about this thing, because then you just go there and you buy a car. But I don't know enough about that law, really.
That's interesting. So you've come into office. Kind of what's your early bill package look like? I know you've been working on stuff. You've been kind of doing the media scene on some things you've been focusing on. So kind of what do your bills look like so far?
Well,
what are their numbers?
Yeah. Well, I just have two bills, AB 18 and AB 19 so far. Those were introduced.
So you got into the top 20.
Got in the top 20, and hopefully it'll be one of them will be the first one to pass out of this place. Mm-hmm. But both the bills are on fentanyl. One of them is sort of a redo of a Melissa Melendez bill, Senator Melendez, on creating an advisement if a person is convicted or in court of drug trafficking, saying, hey, if somebody dies as a result, you can be charged with murder or manslaughter. And that would make a required advisement. And it's very similar to a bill I worked on as a staffer for Assemblyman Todd Spitzer, which when you go renew your driver's license, you have to check a box that says, you understand if you kill somebody while driving under the influence, you can be charged with murder.
Right.
And so we already have a standard for that. But obviously, I know that's got a difficult path forward. But the other one that has just gone crazy is this bill I introduced to require all schools to carry 2 doses of narcan. And I didn't really think that it was a crazy, I just thought it was a normal idea, right? And all of a sudden, LA Times calls me on it. And they did an article about the bill. And then I was on probably 5 or 6 news stations last week. And then on Saturday, I was on CNN and live on CNN.
A Republican on CNN.
A Republican, yeah.
And they were trying to, fun of you.
Yeah. So Joe Patterson, and so I think she was kind of skeptical when interviewing me already, but
where were you on January 6th, Joe Patterson?
Yeah, exactly. Somebody said, "Oh, they're going to do a gotcha question." No, they're not. They're just, and she actually did, but it was relevant to the bill. Right. She tried to, question me on cost or whatnot. But I think this, surprisingly, I've asked some prosecutors and things, well, why would schools need to carry Narcan?
Mm-hmm. Right? What is Narcan?
It's it basically just offsets the effects of your receptors in your body when you take fentanyl and your poison. It goes into you're not a scientist, okay, but it goes into your receptors and then it starts to shut down your brain and your breathing and things like that. Well, this offsets it. It actually pushes the fentanyl out of the way and it takes hold, and it's almost an instant help right away. And it's a nasal spray, so you don't need a lot of training. EpiPens and things like that need a little bit more training, and those are in schools, by the way. But apparently there are issues with kids. And there was actually a teacher, I think in San Bernardino or Bakersfield or something, that was just exposed to fentanyl, and I believe he ended up dying. So it is out there, and the cost is nominal. Rockland Unified already instituted it, or is going to institute, is less than $3,000 for every school in the district to have it. And like I said on CNN, that's budget dust. That's nothing, right? LA Unified's doing it. So I don't think there'll be a lot of actual opposition out there for it. Who knows what happens in the building and during deliberations.
You're going to put an urgency clause in it, just,
take effect immediately.
So
yeah, exactly. So we'll see. I would love to have Democrat co-authors on it. I have a few conversations coming up already. So so hopefully it can just sail out of this place in a bipartisan way.
It's interesting because, I've been to a couple of city council meetings and the police chief's gotten up and they talk about fentanyl and they show you pictures of, it looks like candy. Regular candies you'll see from the store, even packaged similarly in their drugs.
Yeah.
So yeah, you could see how someone in school might not even knowingly take something like this and have a bad effect. So
yeah, and I do obviously worry about, and I did a press conference where I brought a Smartie, one of those candies, and I said, hey, can you tell if this is fentanyl laced or if it's just a candy, right? And you can't tell. That's the pills are becoming rainbow colored, and but a lot of I don't want to say most. I don't really know the statistics on this, but a lot of people, including a kid in my neighborhood, take these pills not knowing it's laced with fentanyl. It only takes 2 milligrams, which is a couple specks basically to be a lethal dose.
Right.
So so it really doesn't take that much, but it's almost always an accidental poisoning. So that's why you use the word poisoning rather than overdose, because they're not intending to take fentanyl.
Right.
So
yeah, that's the kind of the most interesting learning about fentanyl is no one's really going out looking to take fentanyl in its pure form. It's more, laced with other drugs where some of these drug dealers are trying to, save some money.
Or increase the effect, right? There are people who intentionally use fentanyl. I mean, we don't want to dismiss that, but they need help too, right? And I think there are a lot of other ideas that are going to come out of the building. I'll probably have 3 or 4 pieces of legislation on fentanyl. I got a couple more ideas. They're not fully baked, but we'll come out with those.
Right.
So
what's your assembly district too?
The number?
Yeah.
5th Assembly District.
Oh, 5th. So you didn't get AB5. Bummer.
Oh, bummer. Yeah, no, I didn't get that. It was interesting. There was a line to introduce bills the second session.
Right. Everyone want to get AB1.
Yeah. And what's really interesting, just as a sidebar of being a new member, is you're sort of hiring staff and working with them. And for example, Chloe, who's my legislative director, she was already a staff person here, right? So you're kind of, hey, can we do this? Can we get the bill written and backed? And they're kind of working for you already, but not really, right? Because you're not a member yet. So you can't officially hire anybody until December 5th.
Really? So that's what I was wondering. Because we had a recently like a termed out member and they were there on like the last day. And I was like, this is kind of weird. Like, no, you're not gonna have a job tomorrow. Like, who are you gonna work for? Like, So that's funny. So like Kevin Kiley's staff was still working until December 1st.
Well, and I think the assembly will pay you through like mid-January, maybe even the whole January. And so you get benefits and all that stuff. I think it's maybe January 3rd or 4th, and then you get benefits for the rest of the month. Right. So, which I think is the right call. I mean, some people lose their election, right? And then now what do those staff people do? They have to find new jobs. And so I think it's a good employer thing to do. Yeah.
So kind of what are some of the other things on your radar? How many bills do you think you're gonna carry total? Have you kind of decided what your universe is gonna be? And some of the topics you're looking at?
No, we're gonna start having those conversations obviously pretty soon. We're just trying to figure out how to check email, basically, getting the email set up. But in terms of other priorities, I am very interested in housing and infrastructure. Do something on fire. People in the district are bringing a lot of bill ideas to me. I do want to be most responsive to the district. I'm sure, like every legislator, I will have some statement bills, that may or may not get hearings in this place. But I really want to do stuff that address what the residents are bringing to me and what they're saying. Hey, we need to do this, and whether it's a government agency that needs some kind of fix to do something. Those are the kinds of issues that I want to work on. And those shouldn't be, I know how this place works and counting to 41, and I know I'm a Republican, right? But hopefully some of those ideas aren't overly partisan, I guess you could say. But we'll see. I'll definitely have my fair share of statement bills. One that I'm working on is transparency in education, right? So ensuring that parents can see what's in curriculum and that they're notified that they have a right to see what their kids are learning and things like that. And I know that that concerns people, that, oh, now parents are going to start going to their school boards and stuff like that. But that has just always been a fundamental belief of mine.
Right.
When I was on the city council, and I think we talked about this last time, we passed the largest notification area for a development project in the Sacramento region. So the city has to notify 600 feet around a project. And if there's nobody around there, it has to be a minimum of 40 property owners. So you have to keep going until you've hit 40 property owners. Well, the risk there is that we would have more opponents when we're discussing a development project, right? But it didn't matter because nobody could ever complain, hey, we didn't know. We didn't know that they were doing this project. We just wanted people to know what was out there and then come in. And this is the same thing. I think parents ought to have a right to know what their kids are learning.
Right.
Yes, that might bring some more criticism to the boards and some more pressure and things like that, but that sort of runs with the territory, right? So, and then parents can make a decision on whether they want their kids to go there or not, right? And maybe they go to a charter school or make their own decision. There should be no concern with parents knowing what's in their kids' curriculum.
Yeah.
So.
It's interesting. We just recently had a guest on who's worked in the building for a while. He started in the early 90s, and he was talking about when his first state budget he worked on, the total budget was like $43 billion. And last year we had almost $100 billion surplus. We had the largest budget ever. So this year, coming in January, we're going to see the governor's budget coming out. Where, we're projecting that it's not as, it's going to be, I guess, kind of a deficit from last year. Kind of what are some of your priorities in the budget, and kind of what are you looking at, and kind of what do you think the status of the state budget is this year?
Well, I did ask to be on the budget committee, and not a lot of my friends like that I requested that because it's very time consuming, and you do stick around on Thursdays and you're having these hearings and things like that. But I think that's where you can pass the legislation all day long, but if there's no funding for it, it never happens, right? So, and then also when you look at these budget change proposals from state agencies to hire more employees or to use more special funds, right? That's where I think the action is going to be. Why are we hiring more employees here? Why are we growing the size of bureaucracy when we should be focused on infrastructure projects or things that we're already doing, right? And if that means the bureaucracy has to stay smaller for a couple more years while we get through this economic climate, then I guess it is what it is. But a $300 billion budget this last go around boggles my mind. It's crazy.
That is, especially when you consider in 1992 it was $40 billion.
Yeah.
So it's like 80, 160.
Well, I think when I left, Schwarzenegger was still governor, and I think it was like less than $100 billion. I mean, it was that was coming out of a really tough recession, but $300 billion, just to put that in perspective, Russia's federal budget is about $300 billion. I mean, that includes their military, all that stuff. $300 billion, about the same size. Maybe theirs is more now, who knows what's going on, but that's just insane.
That is insane.
Yeah.
And kind of, a lot of that is due to kind of, taxes, I guess, that we've kind of put on. And kind of one of the stalwarts of California is Prop 13 and kind of that housing tax, locking it at 1%.
No.
And when you're locked in at a low price, it's great. But when you're buying a new home at a high price, it's kind of
you're started to sound like a Democrat right there. But it is true. I mean, it's been 1% since 1970, whatever. It's like, well, but also first of all, hardly anybody is in their homes that long. Secondly, I'm paying 1% on my $495. The person who buys a house next door right now is paying 1% on $1 million. And then also, by the way, there's Melrose, so which more than makes up for that. I mean, I'm paying $10,000 a year in property tax on a $495,000 house, right? So, so there's just so much money out there. But I know that there's going to be a move to change the GAN limit, because in this last budget cycle, so the GAN limit for nobody really understands.
Yeah.
I don't either, right?
Even talking to experts last year and going through what we did last year, I'm not certain what.
Yeah,
what happened.
basically, it's a cap on how much the government can spend, or spend based or receive based on population and per capita and things like that. And so last year, with all the federal money, just with all this stuff, California almost hit that GAN limit to where they basically would have to give money back to people, and they did that in selective ways. Right. But so the people in the building are concerned that we might hit the GAN limit, and oh my gosh, what do we do then? Well, it's like, well, how about stop taxing people so much money? I mean, is there ever a point where people just say, hey, you know what? Maybe we're charging too much in taxes. Maybe we should slow down a little bit. But it's like that's never even part of the conversation. It's crazy, So at some point, it makes sense that maybe we can actually not charge taxes on every single little thing, right? So
I know on the other side, people talk about it all the time, like, oh, it's too expensive here. We need to move. So I see and hear a lot of that. But you're right, on the government side, it's never too much is never enough, right?
Yeah, and I think the average person, if you were to ask my mom, hey, what do you think about paying taxes, right? I mean, person who's not, when I say average, I mean, person who's not listening to what's going on up here, like most people should not be. But when I think of, John Doe, I think people are willing to pay taxes for, to provide a safety net, provide the roads and things like that. But goodness gracious, $300 billion in various taxes and fees. And that's crazy. I don't know what that is per person. I don't know. You have a calculator out, but it's a lot. It's a lot.
It'd be one thing if like you paid a lot of taxes and you actually saw the infrastructure and stuff around you and everything's clean and nice. But it's not that way, right? Like I drive on pothole-ridden roads all the way here, and you're kind of like, what are these extra taxes going towards? Like, why aren't this like new shiny roads and stuff like that? So
we have this
frustrating.
We have this huge gas tax. Huge gas tax. I don't know if it's technically the biggest in the nation, but it goes up every single year. And I would not say that we've improved our roads that much. And like you said, have the nicest roads and things like that. So, but it's I don't know. That's why I'm interested on budgets. Like, what are we doing here?
That's first audit. You got to get on JLAC, Joe. JLAC,
oh yes,
Joe.
Exactly. But I do. Interestingly, though, transportation funding happens outside the Capitol in a lot of ways. Maybe the funding happens in the Capitol, but the funding decisions are often happen outside of the legislature. And actually, the chair of the Assembly, Mr. Ting, brought up a good idea: is that if legislators were actually making the decisions on what transportation projects are getting funded, it would be a very it would be kind of war in there, right? People fighting over who gets the money, and then so I'm glad that that's sort of taken out of
It'd be like
legislative control. Yeah, there'd be no money for Republican districts ever, right? So it's good that that's sort of independent in a way. So
I know public safety is kind of a focus of yours and a focus of your constituents. Kind of, what are some of your thoughts on how to address public safety? I know crime is going up and there's a lot of thefts and things like that, especially this time of the year. Kind of what are some of the things you think we can do to kind of get this in line a little more?
Yeah. I think we have to stop releasing people too early from prison sentences without any rehabilitation. Actually, I've been talking a lot about rehabilitation. I've worked on prison issues as a staffer, and it is something that really interests me now. And I was involved in the 3-judge panel on the prison healthcare receivership that ultimately is what led to a lot of these policy reforms, because we lost at the Supreme Court and is letting people out of prison. But I mean, you've seen it in Sacramento. People are let out. They are involved in a shooting, within days of being let out early. There's no rehabilitation programs. And I mean, I think this is one issue on fentanyl, for example, that I like to see, hey, if you actually take some classes, things like that, then maybe you can be let out early. But in I think Imperial County, there was not sure if it was Imperial County, but 2 guys brought in 150,000 fentanyl pills. They were booked. They went to their court hearing. They were released without bail. And guess what? They did not show up to their court hearing. Mm-hmm. Wow, so surprising. So why we have to just use some common sense in some of these things. We have to empower the prosecutors to make those decisions locally also. But I do think that both parties are going to look at solutions to that. I think Democrats are starting to see it. You also see with the homelessness. I don't think it's totally all related to housing or whatnot. But if you arrest a person who's, been trafficking drugs or whatever, or doing drugs, and I know California's kind of gotten away from that, but if you just let them back out with no rehabilitation, then that's a bad thing. Right. So I actually, there's a person in Rockland, and he grew up in a very tough environment, and he was convicted 16 years in prison, and he's probably mid-30s or something. So he was involved in gangs, all those things. And he basically, on his own really, but also rehabilitation, things like that, made a decision that, hey, look, I got to get things together. He's now a youth group sort of advisor for a bunch of churches and things like that to say, hey, look, let's make some better decisions here. And he's very inspirational. I brought him to a Republican press conference and asked him to speak on the topic, because I think most people in prison are going to get out, like 99% of them. You're just going to give them $200 or whatever it is and just say, see you later. No, you have to provide some kind of success. And as a Republican, I'll tell you, I'm willing to invest in that, and I'm willing to work with other people. And I think if you can stop that cycle, our rehabilitation or recidivism rate in California has dropped a lot since I was a staff person, but a lot of that's just because we're not prosecuting the people again, right? So it's
any crimes. Like, I had $12,000 stolen from me, easy case. They don't even.
Did you really?
Yeah, that's just like, it's not a priority.
So. There was an organization that I was involved with in the past that had over $100,000 stolen from them, had email track record. This person was paying bills using the organization's credit card, and it was so obvious, paying rent from the account even. I mean, it was a slam dunk. It took constant, pressure to. And it wasn't because of law enforcement or the prosecutors. It was just because they're harder and harder and harder to get a conviction and actually get that person to, serve some time.
Or like, is this what we want to use our jail space for, or, prison space?
Whatever.
Limited stuff. So it's tough.
Yeah.
You've always been very active on Twitter and social media. How do you feel that's helped your campaign and kind of, I guess, you get to the place where you are today and kind of, interact with folks and your constituents and kind of see it, people's point of view?
Yeah, I think it's kind of a mixed bag. I think a lot of people don't love it that I do that, whether it's my consultants, for example, don't love that I do that. I think also maybe some people think that maybe I'm too cavalier at some points, but that's kind of the person that I am, right? I don't want to change who I am just because I'm in this elected spot. But I would say on the whole, it's been great. I know I've communicated with so many staff people and current legislators now over Twitter, and a lot of the third house people see it too. And I've actually developed some relationships because of it. So
has Fats Domino revealed himself to you yet?
No, yeah, exactly. No. All I really want is to be, what is it, the GIF caucus or whatever that they do, the memes and all that. Yeah. I just want one at some point, one Joe meme Patterson made of me, of Patterson.
There's a great one where Irwin was seen like licking his tie, like he had like mustard on it or something like that. Maybe you can do that.
I'll just do something to get caught on camera.
Smell your tie.
Exactly.
It's always a good one.
Exactly. So.
And, just kind of, based on your Twitter account, a little bit it's about, your kids, a little bit it's about kind of, politics and your job, but a lot of it's about the 49ers.
Oh, yes.
And, interesting season, lose a starting quarterback. Your
Two.
boy Jimmy Garoppolo answered in the lineup. Goes down again, big shock. What is it, the third time in 4 years?
Yeah.
And here comes little Brock Purdy out here looking pretty decent. Kind of how you feeling about the Niners, and where do you think they're going to go this year?
Oh gosh, I mean, if he keeps playing like he did last night, which was against Tampa Bay, that guy was throwing. He like leads the league or something already in these bombs. I mean, it was something crazy outside the number,
Right.
throws over 20 yards or something. He's thrown more in that game yesterday than Jimmy Garoppolo threw in like 4 years,
Right.
So I think they're kind of letting him do his thing. The question is once the pressure gets on, right? Once you get in the playoffs, because Thursday they can clinch the playoffs and division championship. So when you actually get into the playoffs, what happens? Does he tighten up? Things like that. But Mr. Irrelevant, that's his
Cautiously
name, right?
optimistic,
Yeah, I'm
huh,
pretty
Joe?
optimistic. Well, they're
Yeah.
definitely going to make the playoffs. I didn't think that when they were 3-4, but that's California's team, and I think that when I have fans or colleagues that are fans of like the Rams or the Seahawks. I mean, we shouldn't even allow Seahawk fans into the building.
Is that what the consultants are worried about? Not this other stuff you're tweeting about, just specifically 49ers. They're like, Joe, Seahawks fan vote, Rams
Yeah,
fans
exactly.
vote.
Yeah. If I got to lose a couple votes to keep rooting for my team, then I will. So, yeah, it'll be, I love the Niners, and I just won't stop tweeting about it. Sorry.
Have you already reached out to Brandon Ayuk to honor him on the floor?
He should be man of the year.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, he went to Sierra College in Rockland. So, and a little history is every single Super Bowl that the Niners have won started in the city of Rockland, because they used to do their training camp in Rockland at Sierra College. So they are 0-2 in Super Bowl appearances since they left Rockland. And I think it's very important that they move training camp back to
right to the camera.
Must move back.
Jed York.
Yeah, exactly, Mr. York. But during the pandemic, when everything was shut down in California, especially Santa Clara, I had a Facebook post. I think I was just done being mayor, but I said, hey, we will open Rockland back up for you. Sierra College will host. I hadn't even asked Sierra College yet, but
we're gonna figure it out.
But we'll figure it out. You come back to Rockland, but they chose Arizona, and
you should have like a really nice like hotel built right by Sierra College.
Hey, we had one going. We had a good spot for them, so they should have come, but it's okay.
Well, I'm impressed what you guys have done in Rockland. Just you got the Bass Pro Shop, you got all those great eateries going on up there. It's booming.
I think what's great about the development out in Rockland is a lot of it is, I don't want to say recession proof. That just sounds like people aren't taking it seriously. But look, you're always going to shop at Walmart, for example, which is a huge anchor tenant in that shopping center. Bass Pro Shops, I mean, if you're always going to do recreational activity, go fishing, whatever, right? So a lot of those things. And then the eateries too, a lot of it's fast food types. And I know people always love their local eateries, and we have plenty of those too. But also the consistency of places like Chipotle, you're not going to stop getting a Chipotle burrito,
I would just love
right?
to study the Rockland sales tax, like in the last 10 years.
It goes crazy. I think during the last recession, that development project was one of the largest retail projects in the nation. So it's definitely worked out for Rockland. Now there's the Costco going nearby in Loomis, which, as a city council member, I was kind of didn't love it because it was our infrastructure, things like that. But obviously I'm glad that we the council ended up figuring out something so they can get a Costco right there. Yeah. So that's great.
Always good having a close Costco to you.
Good having a close my wife will definitely pay her fair share of sales tax to the town of Loomis. Yeah. So yeah. Think that's what happens when you have 4 kids. Costco, we don't go to really grocery stores anymore. It's Costco because we have so many people to feed these days.
I know, you're big on the pork butt, It used to feed you guys for a week, but maybe
now it's just one meal, basically.
These growing boys.
Yeah, 16 pounds, one meal. So
unbelievable.
Yeah, it's pretty great.
That's awesome. Well, Joe, thanks for joining us. Excited to kind of see where you go in the next few months, and look forward to seeing you on the floor. So,
hey, thanks for having me again.
Awesome.
Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
All right.
Take care.